All right, welcome back. Sorry for the delay with NSA starting up this past week. It's been a little bit busy, but we're hopefully back on track to work through the rest of the Inferno. We're in Canto 14 today, and we have, just as a reminder, we've gone through the Gates of Hell, we've gone through the neutrals that exist outside of the Acheron River. We've crossed over the Acheron, gone through the first circle where the virtuous pagans are, those who, in this sliding scale of sin, committed sins of omission, which is funny to say, committed sins of omission. Their sins were that of lack of faith, lack of true virtue, which is why I put scare quotes around virtuous pagans, because as we're going to find out in Purgatorio, true virtue is only available in Christ. You can have an external kind of virtue, but true virtue is only a consequence of faith and grace. We made it through circle 2 with the lustful, 3 the gluttons, 4 the avaricious, 5 was the river Styx. That's where the wrathful are externally wrathful, violent, biting, gnarling, angry. And then the internally wrathful, the sullen, the slothful. And then we crossed over that river and got to the city of Dis. The demons withstood us for a bit, but an angel came and broke down the door. We walked through. We came to the martyrs, these false martyrs, these heresiarchs in their tombs. And then at the top of that, at the end of that sixth circle, is where we paused and gave a description, got a description of the whole of hell's structure from Virgil. We met the Minotaur. We went down the landslide to circle 7, and circle 7 has 3 rings. We've been through the first ring of the tyrants and the robbers. The second ring, or wheel, is the suicides and squanderers, and now we're entering into the third wheel. So remember, the first wheel was a river of blood. The second wheel was this wasteland of briar and thorn bushes, and so there are these souls encased or entombed or enfleshed with the symbol of the curse, right? And it is not right for them to put back on the form of the body, because they unjustly and transgressively rejected their human form by putting themselves to death. And then the squanderers as well, who put off and squandered their own possessions. So remember, in the 7th circle, this is the circle of violence. You can be violent against an object and or a person and that person's goods. So you can be violent against your neighbor and your neighbor's goods. That's tyrants and robbers. You can be violent against yourself and your own goods. That's suicides and squanderers. Now, in this third wheel of the 7th circle, we're entering into a sandy dune where there's fire flakes and hot burning sand, all sorts of fun things. And here are those who were violent against God, the blasphemers, those who are violent against God's goods, that is nature, that's represented by the sodomites, who are violent against nature. And then, as we briefly heard in Canto 11, you can be violent against not only God and God's nature, but then God's nature's goods, right? And this is the sin of usury, if we are God's children, the things that we make are like God's grandchildren in that relationship. So those who sin against God's grandchildren, that is symbolized by the sin of usury. And so we'll talk more about that when we get to Canto 17 and Dante meets some of them. But for now, this canto is just the blasphemers, Capaneus in particular, and then a fun story about a man on Crete, a statue of a man on Crete. Okay, Canto 14. Pressed by that love for our shared place of birth, I gathered the sprigs strewn before the shrub, and gave them back to him who had grown faint. So at the end of the previous canto, in Canto 13, there was another unnamed suicide whose branches and twigs had gotten all busted up by one of the squanderers who had tried to hide in it. But then remember, the black bitches, the dogs came and grabbed hold of him and dragged him away, and that broke all of these branches, all these twigs, and so the suicide was identified as a Florentine, and so Dante, out of sympathy with his fellow countryman, or his former countryman, now that he's dead, he it says, pressed by that love for our shared place of birth, he gathers the sprigs, right, the twigs, and gathers them nicely underneath the shrub. From there we came to the end of the wood, where the second wheel ends, the third begins, and one sees a fearful work of justice. To make these new things abundantly clear, I say that we arrived at a wasteland which had removed every plant from its bed. That grieving wood is to it a garland, as the sorrowful trench is to the wood. There at the utmost border we halted. So this is in the center of this circle, and the wood that we were just in, the wood of thorns and thistles and briars, blackthorns, that wood is a garland to this wasteland. That is, it surrounds it. Just as the river of blood, that, what does he say, the sorrowful trench is a garland to the wood, right? So we're talking concentric circles here. Composed of sand, barren and thick, the ground was made in the same fashion as that sand once trod under by the feet of Cato. O vengeance of God, how greatly ought you to be feared by everyone who now reads that which was made manifest to my eyes. I saw there many flocks of naked souls, all weeping in their extreme misery, organized, it seemed, by separate laws. Some people were lying supine on the earth, some of them sat all together hunched up, and some walked around continuously. The greatest number were of those that moved, those taking their torment lying down the less, but their tongues were much louder in their grief. All right, so the people lying supine, that's the blasphemers. Those huddled together, hunched up, those are the usurers. We'll meet them in Canto 17. And then those walking around are the sodomites. So what Dante is saying is there are far more sodomites than there are blasphemers, which isn't a good look on Florence of his day. The greatest number of those that moved, those taking their torment lying down the less, but their tongues were much louder in their grief. So those who are lying down, even though there are less of them, they make a lot more noise in their anger and sorrow and grief. Over all that wasteland, falling slowly, swollen layers of fire flakes were raining down, as snow without wind falls in the mountains. Like Alexander in those hot regions of India, seeing flames falling over his troops and landing still whole on the earth, so that he directed his men to stamp upon each flaming ember where it lay, the fire wind being better quenched in this way. So now descended that eternal heat, whence the sand itself flared up like kindling beneath the flint, to double the sorrow. The miserable hands, dancing now here, now there, never found rest, always brushing from themselves each new blistering ember. I began, Master, you that overcome all things, excepting those hardened demons that came out against us from Dis's gate. That's a great compliment. You who have overcome everything, except for those demons back there at the gate. Who is that mighty one who pays no heed to the fire and lies scornful and twisted, such that the rain seems not to make him wise? At this the man himself, aware that I had asked my leader concerning him, cried, What I was alive, such I am in death. If Jove should exhaust his blacksmith, from whom enraged he took the sharp bolts of lightning with which I was struck on that final day, or if he should exhaust all the others in shifts at Mongebello, calling out there at the Black Forge, Good Vulcan, help, help, as he did at the battle of Phlegra, and shoot me with all his force, even then he could not have it of it happy vengeance. Then my leader spoke with so much power, I had not yet heard him speak with such strength. O Capaneus, unextinguished pride! is why you are the more greatly punished. No other torment, only your own rage brings suffering, fitting to your fury. All right, this is interesting. Capaneus is who fought against Jove and lost, is still blaspheming against Jove. What's he doing in hell? What's he doing? What is this mythological creature who blasphemed a mythological god doing in a Christian hell? Right? What Dante is saying is even the Greeks, even the pagans, even the mythologizers, they recognized that there was a higher power. They recognized a supreme deity. They called him Jove. They called him Jupiter or Zeus. But the sin of blasphemy, even in a pagan order, is still existing within the real world that God made. And so when a warrior, a titan like Capaneus, is blaspheming Jove, he is blaspheming God. Right? God takes the blaspheme. God takes the anger and the wrath against this stand-in deity Zeus or Jove, according to the Latins, and recognizes that that is a blasphemy against the higher power. Now, Zeus doesn't exist, except maybe as a demon, but that's a different discussion. But God does. And so when you blaspheme the supreme deity, whether you call him Jove or Zeus or Jupiter, you're blaspheming God. And that is why he is here. And why he is still saying Jove, right? We see this a little bit in Acts 17 when Paul quotes Epimenides, in him we live and move and have our being, right? That's a poem to Zeus. And Paul says he was right. In Zeus we live and move and have our being. Now, Zeus as a name referring to God the Father, Father of Jesus Christ, giver of the Holy Spirit. That's who Paul is identifying in that poem. Epimenides had no idea of the triune God, but he was right about who God is and our relationship to him. And so Paul is able to use that in his arguments and apologetics. So something similar is going on here when Capaneus cries out against Jove and is being punished for blaspheming the triune God. Then he turned to me with a kinder face and said, "This was one of the 7 kings who besieged Thebes. He held God in contempt. Holds him still, it seems, with little honor. But as I said to him, his spiteful rants are fitting decorations to his chest." What decorates his chest? What decorates his chest in reward for his pride, in reward for his blasphemy? His own rants, his own anger. "Now keep close behind me, and from now on see that you walk not on the scorching sand, but always keep your feet close to the wood." Silently we came to the place where spurts out of the forest a small rivulet, the redness of which horrifies me still. As the brook flows from the Bulacame and is then shared between the prostitutes, so down across the sand did this one run. The bottom and both its banks were of stone, the margins too, on the top of each side, such that I noticed there was a way down. Of all the different things I have shown you, after we entered by means of that gate, the threshold of which is denied to none, nothing that your eyes have been observing will be as striking as the present stream, that quenches every ember above it. These were the words of my leader, such that I begged him to serve me with that dinner of which only the desire had been set. "In the middle of the sea sits a land wasted," he then said, "that is known as Crete, under whose king the world before was chaste. There is a mountain that used to know joy, with its streams and foliage, called Ida. It is now deserted, a thing decayed. Rhea chose it as a trusted cradle for her son," that is Zeus or Jove, "and to hide him the better when he cried, set her people there shouting. In a mountain cave stands a grand old man, who keeps his back turned toward Damietta, a city in Egypt." So his back is turned toward the southeast. That means he's facing the northwest. And gazes at Rome as in a mirror. His head is formed of fine gold. Pure silver forms his arms and breast. Then all is of brass, to the place where the body branches off. From there downward he is all choice iron, save that the right foot is terracotta, on which more than the other he stands straight. Each part, save the golden head, is ruined by a long fissure that issues forth tears, which, collected, break free of that grotto. Their course cascades down into this valley, forming the Acheron Styx phlegethon, then falls further down this narrow gutter until that place where farther none can fall, forming Cocytus. You will see what that stagnation is. I will say no more here. And I said to him, if this present rill descends in this way from the world above, why is it just now seen at this border? And he to me, you know this place is round, and yet through all the great length you have come, you have only turned to the left and down toward the bottom, not seeing the full circle. Thus, if something new should appear to us, it ought not fill your face with such wonder. And I, Master, where does one find Lethe and Phlegethon? Of one you stay silent, the other you say is formed from those tears. In all your asking you please me, truly, he answered, but the boiling red water ought to untangle one of your questions. Lethe you will see, but outside this ditch, in that place where souls go to wash themselves when repented guilt is taken away. Then he said, now is the time to move on from the wood. Make sure to keep close behind the margins, which are not burned. Make away. And above them all the fire wind is spent. Okay, so a lot going on here. First, with regard to the Phlegethon and Lethe, Dante is keeping track of the rivers of the underworld that are laid out for us, especially in Vergil, again, book 6 of the Aeneid. And there are 5 rivers of the underworld: the Acheron, the Styx, the Phlegethon, the Cocytus, and Lethe. Dante, the poet, takes the first 4 and places them in hell, and then the last one, the 5th one, Lethe, puts at the top of purgatory. So we'll get to purgatory we'll see that when we get to the top of purgatory. Phlegethon, Vergil identifies here as that river of blood. So we crossed the Acheron, we crossed the Styx, and without knowing it, they crossed the Phlegethon, which was the river of blood, where the tyrants and the robbers are. And that river of blood flows out here at this place, kind of like a drainage ditch, you might say, and a big overflow spill from that river. So this is what initiated the question in Dante's mind. They're coming to this place where this extra runoff is coming off, and it's all dark red blood. And he's like, what is this? So Vergil's explaining, this is the Phlegethon. I didn't name it earlier, but that's what this is. And then he gives this really interesting picture of this statue on the island of Crete. And he faces Rome, so there's this identification with Rome that's going on here. It looks at Rome as if in a mirror. So what is this statue representing? This statue is representing Rome in a significant way. And Dante the poet gives us almost the exact same thing that we see in Daniel 2, right? The statue that's in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Head of gold, chest of silver, legs of iron, and torso of bronze, legs and feet of iron. Here he adds that the right foot is also of iron mixed with terracotta, so it's weaker than the left foot. But he says, interestingly, that the right foot is the one on which the whole body places its weight. So the right foot, even though it's weaker than the left foot, is actually holding the whole body up. the body is given stability by the right foot, even though the right foot is weaker. And then he says, from the neck down, because the head is gold, and from the neck down, so the silver, bronze, iron, all the way down, there's this giant crack, this fissure, out of which flow a ton of tears. And it's those tears coming out of that crack that form the four rivers of the underworld. Okay, what in the world is going on? The head of gold is prelapsarian creation, right? Before Adam and Eve fell, mankind lived in perfect harmony with nature and in perfect fellowship with God. And there was no death. There was no crack. All was good. All was chaste. All was whole. This is the golden age that the poets, even the pagan poets, recognized had to have been. And so Christianity and special revelation come and identify and interpret that golden age as the age represented in Genesis 1 and 2. In Genesis 3, we get the crack, and that starts the silver part of the body. And that crack goes all the way down. The crack is the fall. The crack is the curse. The crack is original sin. The crack is that entrance of death into the world. And from which come tears, right? Pain, sorrow, thorns and thistles, pain in childbirth. And those tears, the expression, the result, the consequence of the fall, are then funneled into hell, forming that entire pit where sin is punished, and specifically done so by the four rivers, the Acheron, the Styx, the Phlegethon, and Cocytus. Interesting side note, the rivers are always referred to as stagni, as stagnations. And so we're not supposed to, when we hear the word river in hell, we're not supposed to think of a clear mountain brook, but rather a soupy marsh. And we've seen this a little bit already, especially with the Styx. This is stagnation. So a place where the water is mostly still. I mean, there's some runoff going down the hill, but where it is in the circles is mostly still. And so you think of rank marsh water where mosquitoes and gnats and that kind of reek is very much present. That's the kind of image, the stagni, that Dante the poet is trying to evoke in calling these rivers these stagnations. So that's the body. He uses the image from Daniel 2 to represent not just the kingdoms of Babylon and through Rome, but rather the ages of the world, namely the two ages, being the Golden Age, prelapsarian Eden, and the fallen world, post-lapsarian Eden, and the world where now we are governed by sin and death. And it is that reality that has formed the pit of hell. Okay, so that's what the statue's what's going on with the statue. One last thing, what is going on with the right foot being weaker and yet being the stable foundation of this whole body? Again, this is a statue who is looking at Rome as in a mirror, so we're identifying with Rome. One of the key distinctions of Dante's work, not just the comedy, but De Monarchia and Convivio and others, is this recognition, identification of Rome as that place, and we'll see this in Purgatorio 16 more clearly, that place where the two suns of the world reside. And the two suns being S-U-N, the two great lights, is what he calls them. Those two suns are the lights of the church and the state. The church and the state. These are the two bodies that govern mankind. The church governs the eternal ends, or ought to govern the eternal ends, by the light of special revelation. The state governs the temporal ends of mankind by light of natural revelation. And again, when Dante uses these terms, or he doesn't use the term natural revelation, but he uses the term philosophy. But what he means by that is a rightly ordered philosophy, a philosophy that actually speaks truth about the world as it is defined by special revelation. So natural law, what is revealed to us in God's world, but an honest and truthful natural revelation. That is what the state governs by. and then the church governs by special revelation. And so we have these two legs. The iron, the fully iron, is stronger. That represents the state, right? They have the strength of the military, they have the strength of the sword, they have the strength of the magistrate that God has appointed to execute justice. The right leg, the weaker leg, is the church, right? They don't have an army, or they shouldn't have an army, according to Dante. They should not have an army. They are the weaker, physically weaker, and yet they are the one that gives structure and order and stability to the whole world, right? So the state is stronger, but the church is far more foundational. The church is the one that governs the whole of human experience, because temporal goods, temporal ends, have no real meaning or substance apart from eternal ends, right? It is the eternal ends, the eternal purpose, the eternal identity of human beings that shape and give structure to the temporal identity and purpose of human civilizations. So why Rome? Well, you have the Holy Roman Empire coming from the Roman Empire, and you have the church in Rome. And here we have this: we have Caesar and we have Peter. These are the two figures that Dante is going to look to for authority in the world. Again, two kinds of authority: one civil, one ecclesiastical, both of which submit to Christ, both of which are ordained by Christ. And it is Christ that governs the world by means of his two officers, Caesar and Peter. Now, you know, right up the middle, straight up the middle Protestant here. I don't believe in the papacy. I don't think the papacy is something that Scripture, as it's currently understood, is something that Scripture argues for. But here's the fun thing: as it's currently understood, neither did Dante. Dante was extremely critical of the papacy, and yeah, I mean, he put more popes in hell than Luther ever thought about doing. And so, when it comes to understanding what Dante is meaning by these two figures, Caesar and Peter, we are free to understand that in light of everything else that he says. And so he's using these figures symbolically, symbolizing the state and the church. And then beyond that, we can have discussions about the best form of church government. But that's what he's getting at: these two realms, two spheres, you might say, that God has ordained in the world, given separate forms of authority, separate kinds of authority. And what Dante is saying in saying that the statue represents Rome is that the seat of those authorities are there in Rome, the Caesar and Peter. Now, again, men have corrupted both spheres. Both Caesar and Peter are broken and fallen. And yet, still, that structure survives, and that is how God governs the world. More on that later, but it's a fascinating first glimpse of that relationship here in this statue on Crete. So, in the next canto, we have a very famous encounter with Ser Brunetto Latini, Dante's mentor in many ways. And so, Canto 15 next up. We'll see you then.